Charles Smithson, who is a wealthy, sophisticated gentleman engaged to a rich heiress, he thinks he has life figured out until he sees Sarah Woodruff, a woman standing on a wave-beaten stone pier staring at the sea. The locals call her the French lieutenant's woman. Why? Because she was seduced and dumped by a foreign sailor and now she is mad, waiting for his return. Charles is drawn to her because Charles thinks that he can change her by his modern scientific mindset. Instead, Sarah lures him into a psychological trap. Charles ruins his life for her, breaking his engagement and destroying his reputation, only to sleep with her once and realize the scandal was a lie. She was never with the Frenchman. She branded herself a whore just to escape the suffocating rules of society. The moment Charles chooses her, Sarah disappears. She leaves him wandering the world for years, broken and confused. The author, the narrator, then steps into the story and says, I am the narrator and I will give you 3 ways this can end. The first ending, where Charles returns to his boring fiancée. The second ending, where Charles finds Sarah and then they live happily ever after. And the third ending, where Charles finds Sarah but she rejects him. He ends up alone but finally understands what it means to be truly free. Greetings and welcome back to the Wild Swans at Coole. Today we are decoding John Fowles, the French Lieutenant's Women, as a historiographic metafiction. So imagine you are reading a classic Victorian love story and it is set in the year 1867. Top hats, corsets and strict rules are all around. Suddenly, the author, that means the narrator, stops the story and looks at you and says, actually I am making all of this up. These people are not real. So suddenly you are like, wait, what? So welcome to the world of historiographic metafiction. Today we are breaking down the French Lieutenant's Women and I am going to show you exactly how it breaks every rule in the book to teach us a deeper truth about history. First we have to understand what is historiographic metafiction. The term is coined by Linda Hudson. It is a mouthful but it just means 2 things. One is historiographic and the other is metafiction. Historiographic means it is about history and how we write it, and metafiction is a story that knows it is a story. Just like metacognition, that means cognition means you are thinking and metacognition means you are thinking what you are thinking. So Fowles is not just telling a story. The story is set in 1867. He is having a conversation between 1867 and his own time. That means in the year the story is written, which is 1969. It is like a time traveling dialogue. Now, in Victorian novels, the narrator is usually like an omniscient narrator or like a god, he who knows everything. But in chapter 13, Fowles does something violent to that idea. He says, I do not know. This story I am telling is all imagination. These characters I create never existed outside my own mind. If I have pretended until now to know my characters' minds are innermost thoughts, and it is because I am writing in a convention universally accepted at the time of my story. This is the metafictional break. Why he does that? Because Fowles wants us to realize that history is not just a list of facts. It is a narrative constructed by people with biases. The ordered Victorian world was just a mask for the chaos of reality. Fowles now becomes the double layer of time. How? Fowles uses the present to interrogate the past. He mentions Darwin, Karl Marx, Sigmund Freud, men who were alive in 1867 but whose true impact had not yet been felt by the characters. These guys were alive in 1867 but the characters did not know much about them. They would change how they would change the world yet. Look at this quote about Charles. Charles called it melancholia. We might call it something else. By using modern words like existentialism, Fowles creates a double layer of time. It reminds us that we can never see the past purely. We always see it through our modern glasses. Let's talk about Sarah Woodruff. To the town, she is the French lieutenant's whore, but she is actually a genius of her own story. She tells Charles, I married Sam. It is because I wish to be what I am. I have no place in this world. She lied about her past to get freedom. She used storytelling to escape her social class. Sarah represents the silent voices of history, the poor and the women who have to create their own sub-narratives just to survive. Every chapter in the novel begins with an epigraph, a quote from a Victorian poet like Hardy, Tennyson, Arnold, or a scientific document like the Registrar General's report Darwin's The Origin of Species. This is a classic technique of historiographic metafiction called intertextuality. By placing real historical documents alongside fake fictional events, Fowles blurs the line between fact and fiction. The epigraphs act as the official history of the 1860s, whilst the story of Charles and Sarah acts as the unofficial or human history. The tension between the two shows that documents alone cannot capture the complexity of human experience. Now, the three endings. The most famous part of the novel. Fowles gives you three endings: the boring Victorian marriage, a traditional Victorian ending where Charles marries Ernestina. The narrator admits this is what a 19th century reader would expect. The romantic ending, that means the happily ever after, Charles and Sarah reunite in a house of artists, finding a happy resolution. And the existential ending, where Charles walks away alone into the unplumbed, salt, estranging sea. The narrator actually enters the story as a character, a bearded man in a railway station to reset the clock. He says the hypocritical obsession with the happy ending is a Victorian disease. The message that he wants to give: history is not a straight line to one truth, it is a bunch of possibilities. Now, finally, look at Charles' hobby: collecting fossils. This is a metaphor for the historian. A historian looks at a dry document like fossil and tries to imagine a living person. But Fowles warns us, we are all in the same boat, and it is hard to believe the past was once the present. The living element is always a bit out of reach. He says, Charles is an amateur planetologist searching for echinoderms. This is a metaphor for the historians. Charles looks at a fossil and tries to reconstruct a living creature. Fowles looks at a Victorian document and tries to reconstruct a living person. Both are bound to fail because the living element is already gone. So the French Lieutenant's Women is a historiographic metafiction because this is not just a book, it is a warning. It warns us to be wary of the tricks of historians. It shows us the birth of the modern man through Charles, who finally realizes he has to find his own way in a world without fixed rules. So next time you read a history book, ask yourself, who is narrating this and what endings are they hiding from me? So it suggests that while the past is real, our knowledge of it always a story. By exposing the tricks of the novelist, Fowles wants us to be wary of the tricks of the historian. Charles Smithson's final realization that he is an outcast who must find his own way in a world without God or fixed social order is the birth of the modern man. Fowles uses the Victorian setting to show us that we are still in many ways struggling with the same questions of freedom and identity, which comes to the question of existentialism. So the references that are used in making of this video are already tagged in the description. You can go and check them. And if you like this video, please make sure to like, subscribe and share with your friends.